Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Kidney Talks with the GW Ron and Joy Paul Kidney Center, MOTEP, the National Minority Organ Tissue and Transplant Education Program, and the Pennsylvania Avenue Baptist Church. My name is Jennifer Arrigo with the GW Ron and Joy Paul Kidney Center, filling in for Dr. Reverend Kendrick Curry. Today, our presentation will be on healthy eating habits and good nutrition, presented by George Washington Transplant Institute's dietitian, Katie Corcoran. Katie will be joined by our panelists, Dr. Joseph Keith Melanson, Chief of Transplant Institute and Division of Transplant Surgery at GW Hospital, Professor of Surgery, GW School of Medicine and Health Sciences, and the Medical Director for the GW Ron and Joy Paul Kidney Center, as well as the pioneer, Dr. Clive Callender, who is Professor of Surgery at Howard University's College of Medicine and founder of National MOTEP. Without further delay, I would like to turn things over to Katie to begin our very informative discussion that I am looking so forward to. Katie, take it away.
All right. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Katie. Like Jennifer said, I'm the dietitian at the GW Transplant Institute. I was asked today to give a presentation on healthy eating in order to prevent chronic disease. So this includes kidney disease, but I'm going to talk about, general healthy eating to prevent all chronic disease. So I'll start off with a pretty short presentation, and then I'll just open it up to more of like a question and answer format, if that works for everybody else. All right. Let's see. So I like to start out with talking about my go-to when I talk about healthy eating with patients. I really like to start with the Mediterranean diet because it really breaks things down into basics of just the categories of whole foods. So the Mediterranean diet pattern is a way of eating that focuses on specific food groups and then whole foods within these food groups, rather than like a rigid diet plan that leaves no room for individualization or preferences. So the Mediterranean diet in particular is a very highly researched way of eating, and it's based off of the way that people in the Mediterranean region of the world eat, because they tend to live longer and they have lower incidences of chronic disease. The DASH diet is also listed on here. That might be familiar to some people if you've been told you have high blood pressure. It's also another very highly researched way of eating that was developed to reduce blood pressure, which is also another way to reduce chronic disease. As you may know, one of the highest risk factors for kidney disease is high blood pressure. And then I've also included just generic, like a plant-based diet on here, just because it's growing in popularity, both in like trend, but also in the research, becoming more and more researched of how primary plant-based diets can help to prevent chronic disease. So another reason that I like to use these diet patterns as a guide is because they focus on food groups and patterns over time, which can be modified to a variety of preferences, lifestyles, culture. There is no one size fits all here. And the good news is that there's many similarities between these diet patterns, which I'll talk about next. So all of the diet patterns that I mentioned on the previous slide share fundamental similarities, which are listed here. Each of these components that are listed are aspects that are highly researched and have a lot of data backed up to show that they're really good for just overall health, but also can prevent chronic disease. So the emphasis of all these eating patterns is first on consuming a lot of fruits and vegetables, focusing on incorporating whole grain foods, which includes legumes like beans, nuts, and seeds. There's an emphasis on fish and plant-based proteins over animal-based proteins. The use of oils from plant-based sources, especially extra virgin olive oil, is highly researched and just has a lot of benefits. And then reducing or limiting animal protein intake, not only in like meat or poultry, but also eggs and dairy. And then lastly, just limiting highly processed foods. So in short, plant foods really do make up the majority of the diet, while animal-based foods eggs, dairy, poultry, meat, all of those things are accompaniments, meaning they don't necessarily have to be cut out completely, but they make up a much smaller portion of the diet. If this feels like a really big change or just not something that you can do all at once, remember that like making small gradual changes over time can make a significant difference and is usually more sustainable to keep up. I know that habits take time to build and are made by making small sustainable changes gradually. So this is where I break it down a little bit and just try to give you a visual of all the fundamentals, but in sort of a plate version. So hopefully this feels a little bit more practical. To start, like I said before, lots of fruits and vegetables. The goal is for vegetables to fill at least half the plate. So here I'm talking about our non-starchy vegetables. So every vegetable excluding potatoes, corn, and like winter squashes, which all of those fall in like the carbohydrate category. The reason we focus so much on vegetables is because one, they're really high in fiber, which helps fill us up so we aren't hungry immediately after a meal. But it also promotes gut health. You may have heard the buzzword, the microbiome, floating around. The microbiome is just all of the bacteria in your gut, which contribute significantly to health, and fiber helps promote that, like a healthy microbiome. Vegetables also contain what are called phytonutrients, which are chemicals that are unique to specific plants that are known to help protect and prevent against chronic disease. So for example, vegetables in the broccoli family, which includes kale and cabbage and Brussels sprouts, are well known to contain a chemical that can help prevent against cancer. Moving on to carbohydrates, which is just this yellow quarter here. The goal is to make them fill like a quarter of the plate and includes things like whole grains or grain foods, starchy vegetables, which is your potatoes, corn, winter squash, and fruit. So the reason that we recommend whole grain over like white or refined grains is again because they contain more fiber and they contain more vitamins and minerals which are stripped from the grain when it's like goes through the refining process. So whole grain foods are things like whole wheat bread, brown rice, oatmeal, whole wheat pasta. The list goes on. The third quarter of the plate is protein. So the emphasis here is to fill a quarter of the plate with things like fish, lean meats, and poultry, or like plant-based proteins, beans, legumes, nuts, or soy foods. The reason that we focus more on plant-based protein and fish is because they contain a healthier type of fat, whereas like higher fat animal products, including, beef, pork, usually lamb, things like that contain fat that is not so great for like heart health. The final part of the plate is the beverage. This is pretty basic. Water is usually always the best choice because it hydrates without including excess calories or sugar, because oftentimes where we get a lot of our sugar is in our beverages. What this plate doesn't mention, but I do recommend, is to do your best to limit like those highly processed foods. This is like fast food, pre-prepared foods, frozen foods, packaged snacks. I understand that everyone lives a real life and that cannot always be eliminated completely. But these foods tend to be high in salt, refined sugars, and saturated fats, which in large amounts are not great for overall health and could play a role in the development of chronic disease. And these foods also tend to be low in fiber, vitamins, and minerals, and all those phytonutrients that we talked about, which are found in more whole foods. So I'll just give again another practical example. This is what is called like the plate model, which is what we just talked about in the last slide, but more accurate pictures. So as you can see, these plates are very colorful. They're vibrant. They contain lots of textures and colors. You can see that vegetables and or fruit fill about a quarter of the plate, We've got carbohydrates filling, or I'm sorry, half the plate. We've got carbohydrates filling about a quarter of the plate. We have like potatoes here and bread. And then we've got protein here, like chicken, meatloaf. There's some yogurt over here, filling another quarter of the plate. Now, certainly not all like meals or foods fit into these nice square categories, but this is just really like a guide to help, jump off of, and can certainly be adapted to lots of different foods, lots of different cultures, lots of different lifestyles. And this is really just like the basic model. So that is it. That's my presentation. I will open it up to questions, comments from anybody.
Katie, that was jam-packed full of information. That was extremely enlightening. I wish my plate looked like that every night. But so I wanted to open it up to not only encourage members of the audience to please go ahead and type your questions or comments in the chat, but I wanted to turn it over to our panelists. Dr. Callender was really into this presentation, and I have a funny feeling he has about 3 questions already to go. And then I'd like to see if Dr. Melanson has any additional comments or questions too.
Thank you for the opportunity. What a fabulous presentation. But I have some simple questions. What's so bad about meat?
Yeah, so the reason that plant-based proteins are recommended more often is because they contain a different type of fat, an unsaturated fat, whereas meat contains more of that saturated fat. Saturated fat is one of the culprits in the development of things like heart disease. So trying to reduce that as much as possible by choosing more like plant-based proteins over animal-based proteins. Certainly, like meat can be included in like a healthy diet. It doesn't have to be eliminated completely. There's definitely room for balance and moderation. But more often choosing things like plant-based proteins and also fish. Fish is really full of good fats.
When you say highly processed foods, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's a kind of a broad category. So it's a good question. What I'm thinking of when I think of highly processed foods are things like fast foods, prepackaged foods, pre-prepared foods, like snacks, really. A lot of those bagged snacks in the grocery store is what I consider like a highly processed food. Things that are high in salt, things that are high in added sugars, things that are high in like saturated fats because they're added in the processing, are what I consider like highly processed food. Most of the food in the grocery store is in some way processed. Even things like a can of beans, technically is processed to get it to be edible. But I'm talking more of like the very refined, looks less like a whole food than it does, a snack.
What's so bad about sugar? You keep talking about sugar. One of my favorite desserts.
Yeah. I mean, dessert, again, I'm an advocate of moderation. A healthy diet includes dessert, absolutely. The place that I find sugar is most found is like in things like beverages. And the reason that we want to reduce sugar is because it's really just like adding energy, calories that we may not need, and of course can contribute to things like chronic disease. Really high sugar diets can contribute to diabetes, other chronic diseases that are not, just other chronic diseases.
And you talked a lot about fiber. Could you break that down for me? What does that mean?
Yeah, so fiber is, technically it's a type of carbohydrate found only in plant foods that your body does not completely digest. So it really is sort of like medicine for the gut, the stomach, the large intestine, all those things, both keeping that healthy, but then, like I said, feeds the microbiome because you're not digesting it. The bacteria in your gut do kind of digest it and break it down. And feeding the microbiome is a really important part of health. Your funny enough, your gut does a lot of things in terms of like immune system and preventing chronic issues.
Great questions, Dr. Callender. Dr. Melanson, before I turn to you, if you don't mind, we have a question from the audience. Miss Angela Brown, Katie wants to know, are there types of fish that are better than others? Some with beans or, non-canned, same with beans, non-canned. So the two questions are there types of fish that are better than others? And are there beans that are better than others that are in a package that is maybe dry or refrigerated versus a canned bean product?
Yeah, in terms of fish, there are certainly fish that contain like higher amounts of what are called omega-3s, which is a type of unsaturated fat that is really good for health. Things like salmon, halibut, tuna are good sources of those omega-3s. But all fish in general is going to be a good option usually. With beans, you can get it canned or non-canned. The only difference between the canned is that it's a lot easier to prepare. It can make it much more convenient, but it also may contain added salt. So if that's something that you're watching or looking out for, I would either recommend getting like the unsalted canned beans, or like they have low sodium versions these days. You can always just rinse the beans under water too. That gets rid of some salt as well.
Great. Thanks, Katie. All right, Dr. Melanson, you have any questions or additional comments for Katie?
Yeah, I've got a bunch of questions.
Guru. I know you are, so take it away.
So first of all, I love what you just said, because, my brother always says tilapia is a swimming chicken. But, but even tilapia is good. I know it doesn't have a lot of omega-3s, but, if you just bake it, that's a reasonable option, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, good. So I'll let him know about his swimming fish, swimming chicken comment. All right. What are healthy snacks? I'm kind of getting at what Dr. Callender was asking. I mean, we, humans, we like to snack, but what's a healthy snack that we could get? Obviously I have almonds here. I love nuts, but, and I know you got to be careful with the salt and stuff, but, what's your strategy as a dietitian? What's a healthy snack? Don't say rice cakes, please.
I won't say rice cakes. Good question. A lot of times for snacks, I tend to focus on foods that contain both a carbohydrate and like a protein or a fat. So pairing sources of carbohydrate with a protein or a fat is going to be best for like blood sugar balance to get you from one meal to the next. So examples of that would be like carbohydrates, so like something like fruit, something like a piece of toast, something like even like unsalted or low sodium, like pretzels, or what's another thing? Yogurt is a good, it contains carbohydrate, but then pairing that with protein. So nuts are a good source of protein as a snack. So like an apple and almonds would be a great idea, or trail mix, as long as it's not super salty. I said yogurt, fruit and yogurt's a good idea, or even something like a small piece of cheese would be a good source of protein. It's hard these days because there are so many options in the grocery store for snacks that, probably taste much sugarier and much more salty than like a piece of fruit. But your taste buds do adjust. So, it doesn't have to be this total like overhaul right away, but if you're looking to try to change your snacks a little bit, give yourself some time for your taste buds to adjust to a less salty, less sugary way of eating.
Yeah, I like that because I guess one of the things I like, tell me if this is good, are apple slices with peanut butter.
Mm-hmm.
So I put the peanut butter on the apple slices. I mean, so that's a good you got protein with the fruit, right?
Yeah, very classic snack, but also, great because it does contain both carbohydrate, protein. Peanuts have good, healthy fat in them.
Okay, so then this is my next question. What is your strategy when you go to a restaurant? Because, the first thing they do when you come to a restaurant, they give you a thing of bread with butter or whatever, and you're hungry already, so you go in there and you want to be healthy, but, you're hungry and you got like some bad choices sometimes, or if you're sitting at a bar, they put peanuts out there. But so what is your strategy, Katie? I mean, when you go to a restaurant, how do you stay healthy?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, first off, I would say not only just with restaurants, but with coming to a meal in general, it's best to make good decisions or healthy choices when coming to a meal. It's best to not be like starving, which is why I recommend snacks throughout the day. So if you come to a meal starving, it's going to be really easy to just choose what is most convenient, what's right in front of you. So, regular eating, regular meals, regular snacks throughout the day is a good option. So if you know it's going to be more than like 5 hours before you go to that restaurant for a meal, have like something small in between, just so you get to it, knowing like I want to eat this, and that's what I'm going to stick to. Another thing, a way to just easy way to eat at a restaurant is to try to do your best to follow like that plate model, whether that means you take some of it home, whether that means you ask for more vegetables, or like you get a side salad instead. Like I said, a lot of different foods can fit into that model. It doesn't just have to be, brown rice and broccoli and chicken. Lots of different foods fit in that model. It's just more about the ratios. And again, if that means you take some home, then that's okay too.
Yeah, what I love about what you said, which made me think of a patient I just had in clinic. I just had a patient in clinic who, on his own, lost over 100 pounds in a year. Right, that's a lot of weight in 1 year. And the main thing he said about the strategy that he utilized to be able to lose that weight was that he started eating a healthier diet, but he really felt like his taste buds changed. And I think, particularly in the in ethnic communities, we get so programmed to thinking food has to be ... It has to, it has to have a lot of sweets, sweet taste, or it has to have a lot of salt or whatever. Your taste buds get used to that degree, but you can change them, but it takes time. And this gentleman talked about how, the way he grew up. I mean, he happened to be an African-American gentleman, and he talked about and he was from DC, but in his area of DC, which was Southeast, and the food that he grew up eating, it had a lot of salt, a lot of sugar, and that's what he craved all the time. So the food didn't taste right unless it had all of that in it. When he changed, when he lost the weight, and when he started eating differently, his taste buds changed. And he said, and he laughed when he was telling me the story, because he was like, the stuff I eat now, I would have never thought was good back when I was overweight. So I think you make a great point in how we can actually change our taste buds by being proactive, by actively eating differently, right? Is there a strategy people can use to try to adjust their taste buds?
I don't know about a strategy. I mean, it's probably something that's just going to happen gradually over time through continuing to try new things. I definitely encourage, go to the grocery store, try like a new fruit or a vegetable. Variety is the spice of life. So, in addition to variety helping to expand your palate, it's also going to get you a lot of different, like those phytonutrients that I talked about, because those are different in all of the fruits and vegetables. But yeah, just give yourself some time and don't give up. That's what I would say.
Yeah, one of the things I tell people is just because we want you to avoid stuff like sugar and salt does not mean that you can't use spices in your cooking, right? And I think first of all, cooking at all is good. It's much better than, even though I wind up going to restaurants probably way too much, but I know that eating at home is much healthier than eating in a restaurant, because they add so much stuff to try to make their food more appealing. So I think that spices, I mean, do you like, I don't want to, I don't want to stereotype you, Katie, but you like spices as well?
Yeah, I mean, cooking with spices is a great idea. Yeah. And even like you said, cooking at home, if that's the only change that you make, if you don't focus on anything else other than I'm going to try to cook at home more this week, or I'm going to try to cook at home X number of times this week, that's already going to be like a huge benefit, because like Dr. Mollenson said, you're reducing the sugar, you're reducing the salt. You get to choose your own spices and level of salt, things like that. It's always going to be beneficial to start cooking at home.
And and this question is for Jennifer. Because in that classic scene in Godfather, when they're making the spaghetti for all the friends, he pours in a lot of sugar. So I'm just wondering. I know you're of Italian descent. So how do you don't still cook your spaghetti sauce that way? Because Katie would not approve of the traditional Godfather way of making pasta. So have you adapted, Jennifer?
So yes, I am.
You know the scene I'm talking about, right?
I know every movie by heart. So I do not use sugar in my gravy sauce, if you will. I just use olive oil and garlic and oregano and onion. I've never put sugar in my.
Oh, come on!
No, I really haven't. I'm not.
You're from the East Coast.
I
Italian
don't.
descent.
No,
That's
I don't.
The first thing you put in the sauce.
No, I never did. Because I don't like. Believe it or not, I don't like the sweet. I don't like sweet taste of food, so I don't like sugar. Which, thank God, I don't. I like other things, but sugar is just not something that I don't do dessert. I don't do cakes. Like I don't have a sweet tooth, so I don't put any sugar in that sauce. I love olive oil and the oregano and the parsley and the onions and the garlic. That's what I load up my sauce with. But I do just want to let everyone know what we're talking about in case we have people that are joining us in mid-show. We are talking about healthy eating and good nutrition habits, right? Healthy habits, good nutrition. And we have some great questions from our audience, Katie, and panelists. So Victor Little says, hey, great information. I'm definitely trying plant-based lifestyle. What is your opinion on just eggs? And then what about Splenda?
Just eggs. That's a good question. I actually haven't looked too much into those. I don't know what they're made of, so I can't really speak to that, unfortunately. I from what I understand, it's like a vegan alternative to eggs. So I can't, unfortunately, speak to that. Splenda, that's a good question. So it really depends on what you're trying to do in terms of Splenda. Because the goal really is to have less sweet foods overall. But if you're maybe on the transition from having food with actual sugar, which is caloric, adds calories, to reducing the sweetness and things, that might be a good way to transition. That being said, Splenda is not going to affect something like your blood sugar, but we don't totally know like long-term effects of how that's going to affect the body overall. There's some studies to suggest that having foods with like a non-caloric sweetener makes you crave sweets more. So that might not be a great side effect. So, in general, if you're trying to cut back on sugar and that's one way that you feel like you can do it, that might be a good transition. But in general, I would say try to just cut back on sugar overall. And if you are going to have something sweet, like a dessert, like a couple of times a week, just have the dessert.
Great advice, Katie. Felicia Phillips asks, what do you think about the use of nutritional supplements? Great question, Felicia. As a way to compensate for what our plates may lack.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it really depends on what you're asking in terms of nutritional supplements. Like, are you talking about like a multivitamin? Are you talking about other things? And everyone is different. It'd probably be a good idea to talk to your primary care doctor. Do I need a multivitamin? Am I lacking in anything? Because that's going to be individual to you. But in terms of things like herbal supplements, those types of dietary supplements, I usually don't recommend those because in the US, herbal supplements and all dietary supplements are not regulated in the same way that things like medications are. So unfortunately, in the dietary supplement world, they can put really anything they want in it. They can put it on the label or not and sell it. So it's kind of risky to do things like herbal supplements and things like that. I know for our patients who have had a transplant, we recommend completely steering away from herbal supplements because we don't know how it's going to interact with the new organ or the medications that they're already on. So I would stay away from like herbal supplements, maybe talk to your primary care doctor about that. and I'd say nutritional supplements, things like vitamins, are individualized depending on what you need.
And I would just love to echo what Katie just said, because I brought this up in the presentation last week. But people often think that because it's something they buy in a health store, or it's quote unquote herbal, that it's not medicine. But just because it's not regulated by the FDA, like the sorts of medicines that we give by prescription, doesn't mean that these herbs are not medicinal. They are oftentimes medicines. And what Katie said is absolutely correct. They're not policed in the same way that the sorts of medicines that your doctor will write a prescription for. So these things can be dangerous. Now, vitamins are, maybe a little bit different, but even vitamins, particularly fat-soluble vitamins, can be a problem if you're taking too much of them. So when you go to your healthcare professional, if you're taking an herbal medicine, you need to let us know, even vitamins, because these things can interact with the medications that we give, and the side effects can be detrimental to your health. So it's very important that you understand that these are medications as well. I'm going to ask one more question since I have you. I know Dr. Callender, part of his healthy lifestyle is not only healthy eating, but avoiding things like alcohol, which is obviously smart. But is one glass of wine with dinner, is that okay, Katie? I mean, I'm just asking, not for anyone in particular, but, just a nice, lovely, red wine, maybe, a good red wine, not cheap. But is that okay? I'm asking for Jennifer. Honestly, I'm asking for Jennifer.
I'm not going to recommend or not recommend alcohol for anyone, but what I will say is that, actually wine is included, like one glass of wine is included in like a Mediterranean eating pattern. And that's really because of, like we talked about, like the phytochemicals it contains, because it is like came from a plant. But, the recommendation is like no more than 2 drinks for men and no more than 1 drink for women per day, just in terms of like the alcohol content. And of course, it's going to add calories. So just balance that with everything else that you're eating.
Thank you, Katie. Now I feel better. Thanks for asking that question for me, Dr. Melanson. I didn't have the courage to do that. All right. So we have great questions here pending from the audience. So one of them was about fermented foods, which I found fascinating. Like you talked about yogurt, Katie. What about yogurt and fermented products? Are they important to incorporate in our diet?
Yeah, I would say in general, I'm pro fermented food, especially because it does contain either like a prebiotic or probiotics that are good for our microbiome, our gut health. You can get like probiotics in pill form, but we really, those are so different, so varied. I would really stick to food first. Fermented foods are definitely like a good thing to try if you like them.
Yes, Victor Little was commenting to the individual that asked that question and said, hey, I love fermented foods. I love kimchi and sauerkraut and buttermilk. So great conversation that's occurring here. So what about hummus? Is that considered a healthy snack?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Hummus is typically just contains chickpeas and olive oil and like a sesame paste. It's a great option to add like to crackers or pretzels or whatever it is, vegetables for a snack to add protein and fat.
Great. Talitha Harrison says one strategy she uses is to incorporate the good food when you are hungry, and that will give you an acquired taste for that particular better choice of that food. So that's
great.
Pretty good. That's a pretty good recommendation. So you talked about Splenda, and I've heard of this particular sweetener, but I don't have any experience with it. So Angela Brown says she's actually trying to move from Splenda to using, is it called monk fruit? Monk fruit?
Yeah, that is another like alternative sugar.
Is that considered to be a better choice?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to say if that's like a better choice. In terms of research, I don't know how much research there is on like the effects of monk fruit versus like Splenda. So I can't say like if one is better than the other necessarily.
Okay. This question is for Dr. Melanson or Dr. Callender. This is one of their specialties, actually, Talitha. Is it possible to reverse kidney disease? And if so, how? Who wants to try it first? Who wants to take a stab at it first?
Well, as you were just last week, well, Jennifer, you weren't here, but we talked about this, and the answer is yes. It's a little controversial because it's once you have damage to anything, you can have what's called fibrosis. And fibrosis is the point of no return, because once you have fibrosis, that means the tissue has died. And as you get more and more kidney disease, you're getting more and more fibrosis, and the fibrosis can never come back. However, I always talk about 5 stages of kidney disease. Okay. And the first 2 stages of kidney disease, most people don't even know they have kidney disease. And you really still have a lot of great function in the kidneys when you're in stage 1 or stage 2 of kidney disease. What really is going on is your kidney is being bombarded by toxins. And the toxins are, caused by high blood pressure, because just the pressure itself is banging into the cells of your kidney, are diabetes. So when you have stage 1 or stage 2 kidney disease, if you are able to stop the toxins that's hurting your kidney, you can go back to just totally normal function, because your kidney is really functioning normally at that point. What really is going on is the damage is being shown by the protein in your urine. So you absolutely can reverse pretty easily stage 1 and stage 2 if there is a definable reason, right? Like high blood pressure or diabetes. Now, if you have an inherited defect in your kidneys that's going to progress over time, then there's no way to stop it, but you can manage it, which is why you would still need to follow with a kidney doctor, a nephrologist. As you get further along, like stage 3, late stage 3, it's going to be harder and harder to reverse the damage, but you can at least stabilize what your kidney function is, again, if you pull away what is causing the damage. So is it possible? I would say yes, for a certain percentage of patients who have early kidney disease. That's why it's imperative that you have your kidney function tested so that you find out. Unfortunately, most people that are going to have kidney disease are not going to find out when they're in stage 1 and 2. They're getting diagnosed at stage 3 or late stage 3. And you have a lot more damage by that point. So that's why every year it's important to get a physical. It's important that the doctor looks at your blood work, but also your urine to see if you have protein in your urine, because that's the first and second stage of kidney disease.
Thanks, Dr. Melanson. Dr. Callender, would you like to comment?
I have to say that I agree with Dr. Melanson. That's his favorite subject, and he covered it well.
Okay, great. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Katie and Dr. Melanson, but you can also reverse kidney disease if it's in the reversible stages, 1 to 3A, if you will, with diet and modifying your diet, correct?
I'll let Dr. Melanson speak to like the reversal.
Yeah. Well, the main reason, and Katie mentioned this, when you make a diet modification for people that have, say, high blood pressure, okay, the top 2 reasons they have kidney disease is high blood pressure and diabetes. Well, it should be diabetes and high blood pressure. Both of these things, if you get diagnosed with either high blood pressure, diabetes, or both, you need to be changing your diet, right? And normally that's going to mean trying to get less salt in your diet and less sugar, refined sugar, which is what Katie talked about. So you definitely need to change your diet. The other thing, which is what was going to be my next question for Katie, is it's going to help to flush your kidney. right? Which means drinking a lot of water. There's so many people that just don't drink enough water every day. One of the problems many people have had is kidney stones. Well, that's usually a manifestation of just not drinking enough water. So water is important. I was going to ask Katie, how much water do you think people should be drinking every day?
Well, I think the recommendation is like 8-ounce glasses, just like 64 ounces of water a day. But of course, if you're active or, it's hot outside, more is better.
That's right. So you got to drink a lot of water. And one of my strategies, when I go to a restaurant, what I've started doing more and more and more is drinking a lot of water, because that also takes up a little space in your stomach. So first thing I do is I try to drink water as I'm getting ready for the meal. But absolutely, this is going to help your kidney function as well. The first thing I will do if I'm talking to, usually it's a friend that went to the doctor and one of their numbers were deranged in some way, I tell them, take the test again, drink a lot of water. And for most of my pretty healthy friends, just drinking more water will make their blood work normalize. So one of the things we need to do, particularly like Katie said, particularly with the way the weather's been recently, so hot and humid, you got to drink a lot of water.
That's an excellent point. My best friend just had a kidney stone, and I saw her yesterday, and I said, "Do you drink water?" And she's like, "Not as much as I should." And I'm like, "You got to drink water."
8 glasses, like Katie just said, at least 8 a day. And if you're more active, you need to be drinking more water. I mean, look, we have right here on this panel a perfect example. I mean, I don't want to give away, I'm not one to talk about people's age, but look at Dr. Calvin. Why is this man in such great shape at his age? Because he eats a healthy diet. He doesn't drink alcohol, and he drinks a lot of water, right? So all those things, besides praying and meditation, and I mean the Queen just made it to 96. Calendar's going to go past that, but it just shows you what it means to be healthy.
I could not agree more.
You may have overstated the case because I think what I have is the gift of God, and I do a lot of the things that you mentioned, but so does a lot of other people who have not reached the age of 85. So I give all the credit to God. Yeah.
You're amazing.
God wants us to eat healthy.
That's right. That's exactly right. Angela Brown's question: are high blood pressure medicines bad for the kidneys, negatively impact the kidney?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there again, it's a little bit of a gray area there, because you can take a blood pressure medicine which can decrease your kidney function, or at least it can cause a derangement in your labs. It can make them go the wrong direction. And I think that's what Angela is probably alluding to. So it's definitely, it can be problematic for certain people with kidney disease to be on certain blood pressure medications. However, in general, if you have high blood pressure, bringing your blood pressure down is going to be better for the kidneys. Now, what is true is when you need high blood pressure medication, the first medicine that's prescribed by the doctor may not be the best medication for you. So there should be an ongoing back and forth. You should get started on a medicine, then you should see, or is it getting the desired effect of correcting your blood pressure? You should go back to the doctor, have your labs redrawn, and like I said, you may have side effects, including that your kidney function could have decreased a little bit on certain medications, because the kidneys they're always adjusting to changes in the blood pressure. Some of these medicines, the way they work, they actually target the hormones that come from the kidneys. People think of the kidneys just as being a pump, but the kidneys have a lot of other functions, and there's a lot of there's a lot of medications really, but it's like hormones and things come out of the kidney. Some blood pressure medicines actually manipulate the way those hormones are concentrated in the blood, and the kidneys may react in certain ways to that. But without getting too complicated, the point is you should be going back to your doctor and getting your medications changed based on what's going on with your blood work. But in general, bringing your blood pressure down to normal range is what is desired.
That was a very comprehensive answer, Dr. Melanson. Thank you for that. So we touched on this subject, but I want to put this out there because it's happened to someone I know near and dear to my heart. And then also I hear this topic when we speak about transplant patients and just, health consumers in general. Protein supplements. In my opinion, the perception is that they have to be great for you, right? Because they're protein supplements. All they're going to do is possibly enhance your performance if you're competing or you're just riding your bike for a long 40, 50-mile ride. But what I don't think people, understand, to your point, Dr. Melanson, is that some of these supplements can affect your kidney function. So, Katie, I don't know if you want to talk about your stance on protein supplements, and then Dr. Melanson or Dr. Callender, if you wanted to talk about how supplements can affect your kidney function.
So I think in general, our culture really likes fads. And right now, protein is a fad. So carbs have been demonized. Fat has been demonized. Like in the 90s, it was really demonized. And now protein is just the best thing for you. But the truth is, we need all three: carbohydrates, protein, and dietary fat in normal amounts. So in general, I always recommend food first. So unless there's a reason precluding you from eating protein from food, really don't need supplements. Most healthy Americans, or people who are generally healthy, are getting enough protein. So we don't really need additional protein on top of that. And when we talk about like the progression of kidney disease, when it goes from like stage 1 and 2 to stages 3 and 4, really the recommendation is to decrease protein. So just to be aware that, these protein supplements are pretty dense, high load of protein all at once. That's not great for someone who is in the stages of kidney disease.
Absolutely. And, I will definitely support everything that Katie just said. And that's really the problem. The problem is the way these fads work. Like she said, carbohydrates have been demonized, and fats, and now it's like you can't go wrong with protein. And the answer is you can go wrong with protein, particularly once you have any sort of decrease in your kidney function. I've talked about the fact that I have 4 boys. They're all athletes. And just recently, one of my sons' blood pressure, it wasn't high, but it was starting to creep up. And he was taking creatine and protein supplements and eating all this protein. And we had to adjust his diet. I was like, you're eating way too much protein. You don't need these supplements. I mean, now, it's a little bit different because these athletes, they're trying to pack on more muscle. But still, it's not good to eat all of that extra protein, and we see it in the blood work sometimes. And again, it's why you need to have good monitoring of what's going on in your body, because your body will tell you when you're overdoing it, and you will see it, and we see it. We so many times when you're checking the urine on a patient or a person who's taken in way too much protein, you'll see it in the urine, right? And like I said, the blood pressure, you can start to push your blood pressure up when you're taking these supplements, and your creatinine can go up, right? And these are all bad signs. So I would say, even for people that are like super duper athletes, I would say, okay, well, even if in your diet you're increasing your protein, you better be increasing your water intake as well. So the more, because that's the way your body is going to metabolize that. And by water, sometimes when you talk, particularly to these sports fanatic types, they hear fluid, they hear you say water, and they hear fluid. Not exactly the same thing, and we can get Katie to talk about these sports drinks, because once again, those sports drinks are loaded with all kinds of things. Katie, can you speak to the sports drinks?
Sure. Yeah. So sports drinks, things like Gatorade or Powerade. I think of them they could be useful in a very specific situation, such as like someone who is an athlete is during a game. There's no time, or it wouldn't be practical to go and like have something like a snack with sugar in it, which is why those drinks contain sugar, right? Like you're really active and you're, say, like a football player in a game. Your body is running out of carbohydrate, needs sugar. That drink is a good way to replenish that sugar while you're in a game. But for someone who is just like a typical person, even just like someone who is typically active, those drinks aren't really necessary. You can get all the fluid that you need through water, and like a healthy meal afterwards to replace your electrolytes.
That's an excellent point, Katie. Thank you. Great discussion. Theolinda Elise Charles has posted a question and says, "Good afternoon. My mom has really heavy and swollen feet. She needs help. Any advice for Theolinda?" Who would like to take that?
I think that you have to understand that swelling of the feet is a sign of many things. Kidney disease is one of them, but also so is heart disease. So is liver disease. So I think she needs to be evaluated by a physician to decide how is her heart, how is her liver, how are her kidneys. And then, of course, also the dietary aspects of salt and is also an additional concern. But when you have swelling of the feet or hands, that's a sign that your heart, your liver, or your kidneys may be dysfunctional.
Thank you, Dr. Callender. All right, Katie, this was extremely informative and so helpful. Great conversation that was had by audience members as well as panelists and you as the presenter. Any closing final comments? And then I'll ask our panelists to also have any closing comments as well.
The only thing I would say just in conclusion is to give yourself a lot of room for grace. Making changes over time, like I said, happens over time, and habits take a long time to either break or make. So just stick to like making small gradual changes over time. You don't have to do a complete overhaul of your whole diet all at once to see benefits.
Great advice. Thank you.
I would say, and speaking for someone who's done fad diets, like just eating grapefruit. I'm joking. I've never done that one, but I have done fad diets. And I think Katie is dead on right when she says, in order to, even when you're trying to get healthy and you want to try to push things out of your diet, still have a lot of grace in the sense that, it's okay to cheat every now and again. But in general, you want to move in a healthy direction and you want to make it part of your life. Right? Not just I'm trying to lose 5 pounds or I'm trying to the most successful way to change your diet is to change the way you live. And that's when over time you can become healthier. But you need to be nice to yourself as you make this transition. Great presentation, Katie.
Enjoyed it very much. And I would say that the key thing is the balance that you talked about. That beautiful picture of the vegetables over top of everything else emphasizes the importance of balance in life and everything, and especially in your nutritional.
Great closing remarks, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We want to also tell you that we will be back in 2 weeks, Friday, September 24th at 2 p.m. Eastern time on Kidney Talks. Katie, great presentation. Thank you so much. Dr. Malone-Stein, Dr. Callender, pleasure as always. Everyone tune in 2 weeks. Until then, stay well and be blessed. Take care.